it's Missy.
Hey, it's April.
And this is SheelaNaGig. Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Of course, each week we present and explore our own SheelaNaGig, a woman whose strength and perseverance has led her to greatness, who empowers us, inspires us. It could be somebody that you've heard of, and we just want to give this Sheela a little bit more light, but it also could be somebody that you've never heard of, and we absolutely think you should know about. So that's what we got going on. And again, we're so happy that you're here. We welcome your questions, your comments, and any Sheelas that you have for us. Please send them our way.
We love getting new ideas for Sheelas. There's always somebody that we've never heard of that all of us should know more about.
Absolutely. And it could be somebody in your life. It could be like your grandma or your mom. You know, maybe they want to do, maybe they're still living and want to do an interview with us. I don't know.
Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
We've had some pretty amazing interviews.
Oh, we've had some great interviews as of lately. So hopefully you've listened to some of those. They are really awesome, and we feel really lucky to have the opportunity to interview some really powerful women.
Very dynamic, and like all of our Sheelas, they do 600
a million and one things, right? But they don't work
exactly.
They don't work at the dead letter office.
Oh, Missy!
Oh, I did it!
You finally said
Remember,
it
I said today we weren't going to say it. But
yeah, she did. She told me no dead letter office references.
You got to get off the dead letter office. Okay, sorry.
I loved it. Thank you. I feel better.
Do you feel better
now?
That it was at least mentioned once?
Yes, and that you mentioned it.
We're done. We're not mentioning it again.
All
right. How are you, April?
I'm great.
Passover was yesterday. You cooked for a lot of people, right?
Well, that was the funny thing. I was supposed to cook for a lot of people, but then my guest list got cut in half, and I completely forgot that I purchased a 9-pound brisket. And so in my head, I edited it when my guest list got cut in half. I thought I bought half that amount of brisket. And when I got up at 8:30, I got up at 5, but when I put the brisket in the oven, I really wasn't thinking the fact that I should take that 9-pound brisket and cut it in half and only make half of it.
Oh.
So guess what time it was ready?
What time?
Midnight.
I know nothing about the cooking of meat because I'm a vegetarian.
You're vegetarian, right? I said to Missy, I want to talk about my brisket today.
She wants to go to brisket.
Great conversation for a vegetarian.
Yeah, so if you have any tips about how to cook brisket a little more quickly for the future for April, that would be helpful.
One tip I already figured out at midnight, and that is I could have cut it in half and froze half. But no, I let it cook all the way through.
We live and we learn. So what did you have instead of brisket?
Well, fortunately, if you know anything about Passover, you know you eat an army of food.
Yes.
There is the matzo ball soup, the gefilte fish, not to mention the
gefilte fish. I love the way you said that. Say it again.
Gefilte fish. And then we have salad and chicken and roasted potatoes and vegetables. And then there's dessert. So... And apparently, thank God, the chicken was delicious.
Oh, good.
And nobody said they missed the brisket.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad, April. I'm glad. Yes. Well, yesterday we celebrated my son's 19th birthday.
Wow, no way.
I mean, he turned 19 on Thursday, but we just kind of had like a little bit of pizza and cake that night, but we actually spent the day together yesterday.
As a family.
Which
Nice.
I often have to work on weekends, so that was really nice.
And what did you do?
Well, we went to Bob Baker Day. I'm a huge fan of Bob Baker, the marionette puppeteer extraordinaire, who has since passed away, but has an amazing theater here in LA. And for those of you who live in LA who have not experienced the Bob Baker Theater, you still kind of have a new location. It's not new anymore, but it's in Eagle Rock.
Oh, really? I haven't been to Eagle Rock.
Yeah. And, they still put on amazing productions and, keep the integrity of all the puppets and with, and the instruction that Bob Baker instilled upon the theater. And it's beautiful. I
can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, and he did all the puppets for Sound of Music, for instance.
Wow.
I always think that's a really good reference because most people have seen Sound of Music. He was really considered, probably the greatest puppeteer of Hollywood. Just an amazing guy. I got to meet him a couple times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very cool.
He'd always have like the ice cream social after the play, and he would come in and talk to people. And
I took my kids when they were young, and they're 21 now, so it tells you how long ago. And I think I recall after the show, there was a whole social thing.
Yeah,
and
he'd always act like it was just special for that group. Like, you guys have been so great that we're going to give you ice cream. Yeah,
that's very cool.
But I have 2 posters that are signed by him too.
I know.
I got him to sign. Yeah, there's one in my bathroom.
One in the bathroom that I notice every time I use the facilities.
Yeah, I know. I have another one that I actually got from my aunt because she lived Baker too. So I now inherited it. But yeah, so we went there, and it was so much fun. Oh my God. I got a snake around my neck, a giant
I saw
python.
that picture.
Yeah, I sent it to you. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I got to pose with some of the puppets, which really made me happy. There's tons of artists. And you know who I ran into?
Who?
Jen Hitchcock.
No
Isn't
kidding.
that crazy?
Wow. Jen was our original podcast social media guru.
Yeah.
She got us going on social media.
I like to call her LA's media darling. Like, she's a book show fame, and it's funny because I just kind of bumped in, kind of gave her a little shove. I was like, Jen Hitchcock. She's like, oh my God. So it was really nice to see her. She was on our episode about Emily Hahn.
That's right.
And
she definitely
she was
contributed.
a big part of the podcast when we first launched, and she's amazing. So it was great to run into her, and it was just such a cool event. And then afterward, we went to this thing called the 2-Bit Circus.
Ooh.
Which is really cool. It used to be in downtown, but they've moved it to Santa Monica. And it's this, you pay a flat fee, and it's an interactive video game experience. And there's a lot of old video games, but then there's a lot of new video games, and there's a lot of virtual reality stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
How fun.
it was really funny. Ellery and I put these glasses on, and you go out on the promenade with the virtual reality glasses on. And we're both like chasing things and trying to, they have these coins floating in the air, and you're like trying to, and all these people are looking at you like you're crazy because they can't see the coins. And there's like a thing of lava that, you have to walk over, and people were just staring at us like we were nuts. But it was super cool. I highly recommend it. There's this thing where you go to space. It was really, really, really cool. We had a blast.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
And
I definitely recommend it.
And can we say happy birthday, Nolan?
Happy birthday, Nolan. He had a better 19th birthday than 18th. He was really depressed on his 18th birthday.
Well, becoming an adult.
I think, he's always had a really, he's been a high concept thinker, just a high sensibility, very empathic, and turning 18 was just rough for him.
Well, I'm glad 19 was so much better.
So much better.
Yay.
So much better.
All right.
Yeah, what a difference a year can make, right?
Amen.
Yes, yes. But enough about us, but it's nice to catch up.
Yes, it was nice to catch up. Right.
Yeah, right?
So darling, tell me about your Sheela.
I'm very excited. I absolutely found this Sheela fascinating, which I find all my Sheelas fascinating. I really do.
I was just going to say, tell me a Sheela you weren't completely smitten with.
I know. I'm to the point where, I always say, I went down I go down the freaking rabbit hole every freaking time. This is nothing new.
Missy lives in the rabbit hole.
I live in the rabbit hole. I do.
And we love you for it.
It's cozy. But I'm going to talk about somebody that I had never really heard of before, that I learned about. So, again, I'm hoping to give this Sheela some light. I will tell you this, too. There is no... there are a couple books about her at this point, which is great, but there's never been a documentary made about her. There's never been a movie made about her, and I don't know why not. So whoever's listening to this, maybe you'll beat us to it. But maybe that'll be our next project. Maybe we'll make a movie. How about that, April? Right?
We're still trying to get out a newsletter, but okay.
We just gave you a great idea for it. When you hear the story, you're going to want to make a documentary. Maybe you're a filmmaker. You're going to want to make a documentary or a movie about this amazing, amazing woman. So I'm going to kick it off. Her name was Mercedes de Acosta.
Mercedes de Acosta.
She was a Cuban-Spanish writer, playwright, poet, fashion influencer, costume designer, and socialite. And she was recognized for her significant contributions to the arts and her bold exploration of her identity as an out lesbian, and more generally as a woman boldly making her way in the world.
Sounds intriguing.
She was also a committed suffragette and engaged in various artistic and social movements, including women's rights, and also Eastern spirituality.
So did she live here in America, or did she live abroad?
Oh, April, I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry.
Look at her just jump.
Well,
she's already ready just to jump way ahead.
Well, it was intriguing.
Okay. No, she's from New York, like you.
New York, a New Yorker. I love it.
Exactly.
Keep going.
Okay, so she may be, still somewhat of an obscure figure today, but during her lifetime, she wrote numerous poems, plays, screenplays, and she belonged to, artistic communities in both New York and Los Angeles. And truly, though, her most impressive creation was herself. She was a strong and original personality, and she was just unapologetically, again, an out lesbian during a time when that really wasn't happening. Because she was born in 1892, so we're talking.
Yeah.
This did not happen during those days. That was not something that you admitted to, or this was something that was completely done in private in those days, which is ridiculous, but that was the case. It was a period of time, of course, that there's something I read, and it said in a period of time that many people even doubted the reality of a female orgasm.
Wow.
Acosta was making woman-on-woman pleasure the smart, chic, and glamorous thing to do, and she wasn't afraid of those repercussions.
Good for her. Yeah,
good for
very,
her.
very much ahead of her time.
Oh, yeah. Totally progressive, not afraid to be who she was, not afraid to own it. So, Acosta was born again in New York City on March 1st, 1892.
Wait a minute. She wasn't born again. She was...
Oh, shit. She's not born again. Okay. That's for the bloopers, Andy. Sorry. Okay. So, Acosta, again, was born in New York. And she was born on March 1st, 1892, to wealthy Spanish immigrant parents. Her father was named Ricardo de Acosta, and he was actually born in Cuba. And then her mother was from Spain and later immigrated to the United States. And her mother was named Micaela Hernandez. And their extreme wealth granted them entry into predominantly Anglo-New York society, which was kind of unusual.
Well, it goes to show you if you have enough money, you can look a little different, and everybody tolerates it very fine.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So she was the youngest of her siblings, Ida, Ricardo Jr., Angela, Maria, and Rita. And she and her family just kind of moved in these high society circles. They were often entertaining neighbors that included FDR and members of the Vanderbilt family. It also included some connections to predominant modernist figures such as Stravinsky and Pablo Picasso.
Wow, quite a roster.
Yeah, quite a roster. Rubbing elbows with the elite. So, young Mercedes led a very unconventional life. And from the get-go, she kind of bucked that convention. And even as a child, she's quoted as saying, "The stiff starch frock with the usual sash in pink or blue around my tiny waist and uncomfortable leather pumps." She was expected to wear this outfit at all formal parties, where she was, quote, pulled about by some dreadful little boy who in most cases could not lead me as well as I could have led him.
I love a confident woman.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, she reportedly thought she was a boy up until about the age of 7. And her parents encouraged this perception, addressing her as Raphael.
Oh, I love it.
I know.
Wow.
They allowed her to dress in boys' clothing and eat in suits. And they encouraged her to participate in activities largely reserved for males at the time.
I love that they just took her for who she was and empowered her to be a powerful person. Ooh.
I think that's amazing. And again, so progressive at that time.
Yes. I mean, my goodness, that would be scandalous.
I think it's hard enough for parents now.
Yes.
But in those days, I mean, I give her parents a lot of credit. A lot of credit.
Yeah.
So she only realized that she was not a boy when a playmate exposed his penis to her. Challenging her, have you got one of these?
I guess that is the ultimate challenge.
It really is. Acosta was horrified, and, quote, she said, "I'd heard about grown people and children being deformed. So I yelled out, 'You're deformed.'
Yeah.
If you are a boy and you haven't got this, you are the one who is deformed," he shouted back. By this time, the other boys had joined us, and each boy speedily showed me the same strange phenomena the first boy had exhibited. They demanded then that I produce the same phenomena. "Prove that you're not a girl," they all screamed.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That was the moment of truth.
I think so.
Yes. So her parents then decided to send Mercedes to convent school to learn some feminine ways.
So they kind of cracked to the pressure.
Yeah. At this point, they thought, well,
maybe they thought it was harmless when she was little, but as she was getting older.
I think so. I think, and it started showing some obstacles, and at that point they said, oh, okay, we might, we better start helping her out here a little bit. So she was sent to the Convent of the Blessed Sacrament in Manhattan at the same time as writer Dorothy Parker, and the two became friends.
Oh, interesting.
I know, they were friends as girls. Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
Yeah. So while there, Mercedes befriended two lesbian nuns, and her job was to deliver notes between them, and she would even stand guard in the corridors while they stole some privacy.
Ooh.
And she said she witnessed in grief and horror their forced separation at one point.
Oh, no.
Yeah, for a second they stood mutely, and then they cried, she said, a cry like the cry of death.
Oh.
And Mercedes ran down the hallway screaming hysterically, I am not a boy and I am not a girl, or maybe I am both, I don't know, I will never fit in anywhere and I will be lonely all my life.
Oh.
She was very confused by this, and it broke her heart.
Yeah, I'm sure that was at a time, her formative years.
Exactly.
So that must have been really made a big impression on her.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And in the first draft of her autobiography, we will talk about that later, she recalls her bewilderment at the convent. She's quoted as saying, I cannot understand these so-called normal people who believe that a man should love only a woman and a woman love only a man. If this were so, then it disregards completely the spirit, the personality, and the mind, and stresses the importance of the physical body.
Well, how old was she when she said this?
Again, very young. She eventually ran away from the convent school. She returned home, but she was young.
That was a very insightful thing to
She was
say.
always very, very insightful.
Wow.
Yeah, from the time she was very young. And very confused by this. Which
I see why.
I think it's confusing too. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you love who you love.
Right.
And some people are bisexual, some people, you know what I mean? And some people
but to have the insight to say that, to make everything black and white, that is dismissive of, what did you say, your soul, individuality, and that was just an extraordinary thing, I think, for a young person.
The spirit, the personality, the mind.
To put together.
Yes.
I get love who you love or whoever you are, but to really have that sense of we're all individuals, and this concept dismisses all of that. That's interesting. That's very cool.
Right. And we should have that opportunity if we so desire to love whoever we want to love and be attracted to whoever we're attracted to, right?
And to also recognize that we're more than just our gender.
Exactly. We're more than just our gender. Yeah.
Or even our socioeconomic position. We are more than the rules of society.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I dabbled back in the day a bit. It's interesting because
I think that on a certain level, I certainly, I don't know if I would describe me as dabbling, but I was certainly interested and curious, and I think that is very natural, or it can be for some people, and I think that it's nice, I think, for some of our younger generations to have more permission to explore that.
Yeah, and I think you see it more commonly, which is, I think, wonderful. Mm-hmm. I think that's great. I think that you should explore. You should be curious, But
tell us more. She's fascinating.
I know. She's pretty amazing. And we talked recently, too, about something about girls during, and young people, I should say, young people in general. Back in the day, they just were such high concept thinkers again. They were so ahead of their time with their language, and just so precocious.
Right.
Some of these things, we've come across. I remember recently with Rose O'Neill, we were talking about some of her quotes as a young girl.
Yes, she talk about precocious young person.
Yes, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But as Mercedes grew older, she fell in love with dance and theater and artists, and performers, and that really became her salvation, which makes sense. The world of art, world, this is a much more open world.
Definitely freer to question and explore and imagine other possibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she also began writing poetry as an outlet for her torment and confusion. This became a very natural thing for her to be writing in journals and creating poetry. And so at one point, she's a little bit older now. This is, in her latter teen years, she decided that she was going to try being a nurse's aide. Her mom was trying to suggest,
more
a path for her, more traditional path. And so she tried to be a nurse's aide. And there was a quote where she said that, she would start writing at midnight and then continue until the early hours of the morning. And she said her mother sometimes saw my light and was angry with me for staying up so late. Like most mothers, she thought a woman's career was in the home and marriage, a view I did not share. So I believed without a shred of humor in every form of independence for a woman, and I was already enrolled as a worker for women's suffrage at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's on her way.
Yes. So I think it's a little bit interesting because it sounds like her mother was very progressive when she was a child.
Well, it could have been that she didn't think it would last. Like it was just a stage.
Exactly.
And she'd grow out of it.
Exactly.
Because it sounds as though when she became a young woman, her mother was quite bought into behaving like that she behaved like a young woman.
Right. And she's trying to get her on the straight and narrow now. Okay,
yeah.
let's get you your
that
nurse's
was
aide
fun.
job. Yeah. Let's get you married.
Right.
Yeah. So Acosta went on to become a captain, actually, for the women's suffrage movement. And again, a quote, she said, I canvassed every house and was verbally armed with every reason why women should have the vote. I rang every doorbell.
Wow.
So she was very committed. She was very, very committed. She was very young at this point. Because of her mother's attitude, however, she kept her writing and her poems a dead secret for several years.
Well, that sounds like it might be a good idea.
Yeah. So even though she was really, really flourishing as a writer, she knew that her mother wouldn't quite approve of that at the time. So at 22, the Lincoln Journal-Star described Acosta as one of New York's prettiest eligible girls.
Oh.
When you're high society, I think it's interesting that, the paper actually, hey, look at this lovely lady over here.
Well, ironically, I believe they called it coming out.
Yes. Ironically. It's true. Ironically. Oh, that's hilarious. And it's around this time that Acosta became involved in numerous lesbian relationships with Broadway's elite mostly, and her uncloseted and unapologetic existence was rare and of course daring, again, as we said,
right.
during this time for her generation. And in 1915 she began her first lesbian affair with actress Alla Nazimova, and later with dancer Isadora Duncan.
Really? Oh, wow. I'm jealous. Okay, I have a crush on Isadora Duncan.
You never told me that you had a crush on Isadora Duncan.
Of course I did. You know how passionate I am about dance, and she was just the ultimate,
I know.
just spirited, graceful dancer. Oh, my gosh. Wow.
And I'm going to say Isadora Duncan.
Isadora Duncan.
In 1919, she actually published her first prose poem collection. It was called Moods.
So she got published pretty early.
She did, yeah. And critics praised her work at that time, and they predicted her rise to literary fame.
Really?
But the love of other women that fueled her writing also limited her opportunities to fulfill this destiny.
Okay, that would make complete sense.
Yeah. So she tended to write about being a lesbian and her feelings toward other women. She also wrote about things such as incest. I mean, different things that were really, really not talked about.
Was that in her own history, or
no,
just something of interest to
not
her?
that I know of. No, not that I know of. But she liked to push the envelope.
Yeah.
So she wrote about a lot of things that other writers were not really writing about.
Well, can I say I would definitely read something about an affair with Isadora Duncan?
Oh, and you can. I'll tell you about it. Okay. So she later published Archways of Life in 1921 and Streets and Shadows in 1922. She was prolific.
Wow.
Yeah. She was getting these books out. And during this time, she was also a tireless advocate, of course, for women's rights. And again, doing all of this at once. She was writing, she was creating books. She was, involved in theater.
I remember
dating actresses and dancers. Yes.
I remember you saying in an interview with Brooke Ferry that, who does 247 things.
Yes.
That women who do a lot, or people that do a lot, are able to get a lot done. And
right.
She sounds like another one of those Sheelas.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. I always like to say the more I do, the better I do it.
Ah.
But I don't know if that's just an excuse. But I do like to say that.
I could sign on to the more I do, the more I get done. Yeah.
Okay.
Like somehow being busier makes me more productive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So she identified as androgynous.
Uh-huh.
And she favored black silk cloaks. She loved trousers. She wore these amazing, like, tricorn hats.
Ooh.
So she kind of looked like a little pirate. But she loved to wear, like, blood red lipstick and cadaverish white face powder.
Oh, fun.
They often said that she would wear all black or all white. So that was actually a nickname that was given to her later, Black and White. And it also, they said, referred to her moods.
Ooh, so she had a little stormy personality?
Yeah, she could be a little moody, apparently.
Oh.
But she was dealing with a lot, too.
I would say.
You know? Yeah.
It's not easy being ahead of your time.
Right. It's not. No, it's not. In the midst of this, though, this is very interesting. So, you know, she was living this openly lesbian lifestyle. She was not quiet about her relationships. She was, you know, out in the open. She was this androgynous dresser. She was making a statement. And in the midst of all this, at age 27, she married wealthy and successful artist Abram Poole.
Abram, a guy.
A guy.
A dude. So what happened?
Well, it's said that it was most likely to please her family and to also serve as a convenient cover when she needed it.
I wonder, do we know if her husband also needed a convenient cover, or was this...
Not that I know of.
Okay.
But he apparently was fully on board.
Oh, he didn't care.
Knew that she was involved with women and was very open to that. He was an artist as well.
Oh, okay. That helps.
And I don't quite understand, but it worked for them.
Okay.
It worked for them. So Poole was the son of a wealthy Chicago family, and when the two married, he bought a New York mansion for the woman the New York Herald described as the poetess of society.
Ooh.
So maybe the poetess of society also needed a husband. I don't know.
Right.
You know, it's, you know, which is it's funny because of course everybody knew, but maybe it looked good when she needed it.
Right.
But she wasn't denying the fact that she was a lesbian still,
just
even though
curious-
she was married.
I'm curious to know what was in it for him. Like if...
And that I don't get. I never really fully wrapped my head around that.
Maybe he liked being married to the poetess. What was she?
Of society.
Of society. Yeah.
And I mean, I think they were definitely friends, and I think they shared an artistic sensibility,
And
it
that
seems
could be,
like.
yeah.
So, you know, obviously I'm sure there was companionship.
And maybe he was, quietly...
And she did indicate that there was a sexual relationship at one point,
I was
too.
wondering, yeah.
She did. There's a quote where she kind of indicated that they were carrying on with a sexual relationship for a time. But she would later state that she did not find Poole very interesting as a person.
Oh.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah. Especially when you're married.
But again, Poole supported Acosta throughout their marriage, and they lived apart for the most part. They didn't even live together
Okay.
for the most part.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's what it was.
They both traveled pretty frequently, and they both lived, you know, they both had their own places and kind of lived apart. So, you know, again, it's said that it was more about, you know, practicability than a romantic affection. So, there's this beautiful portrait, by the way, because he was a great painter. He's actually a very well-known painter. And there's this beautiful portrait that he did of her.
Oh.
You have to look it up.
I'll have to look it up, yeah.
Yeah, she's wearing, she has this jet black short hair and these gorgeous, like, buckle shoes on. And it's kind of this pronounced, her look, and it's from the side. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You have to look it up. So that same year that she married, she also published her first novel, which was called Wind Chafe. So 3 days before her marriage to Abram Poole, she met Eva Le Gallion, a young, attractive French actress. She was very ambitious, and at this point she was stunning all the Broadway critics. So the two of them had kind of met, and they arranged to have lunch at the Ritz Hotel. And by the time the lunch was over, they had worked themselves into a pitch of excitement.
Oh.
And they were finally asked to leave.
Thrown out of another joint.
Yeah, thrown out of another joint. Probably for making out in public. And they left. They left for Mercedes' apartment. And Mercedes recalled in an early typescript of her autobiography that Ava was surprised when I told her that I was being married within a few days and would be going to Europe with Abram for the summer.
Oh, well,
Yeah. So 3 days later, after
she got hitched.
after she had this,
Scandalous.
crazy romantic entanglement.
And being thrown out of a public place.
Yeah.
In the midst of it, she got hitched.
She was marrying a man.
Well, I did go down the rabbit hole and took a peek at the portrait. It's quite lovely.
Isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's artistic. It's just, it's definitely a work of art.
Oh,
yeah.
Stunning. He was great. He was a great painter. Really talented painter. But upon her return, after spending that summer with Abram, she and Ava Gallion, they hooked up again.
Ah.
And in fact, I believe that Ava came and visited her too that summer while she was in Europe.
Ah, well, you said that.
There's a little info about the two of them kind of sneaking, meeting up.
Well, Poole was game, from what you've said.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he was game, but I think he just kind of turned the other way.
Okay.
I don't think he let it affect him. And so when she returned to New York, though, of course, they picked up kind of where they left off. Mm-hmm. And Gallion inspired Mercedes to start writing plays at this point because she was an actress and really loved her poetry and encouraged her to start writing plays. So in 1920, Mercedes wrote her first play. It was called Moonflower, and it premiered off-Broadway.
Nice.
And then her writing career received a big boost when she ended up writing 2 plays for Le Gallion to star in.
Oh.
So they were quite the team.
Yeah.
So the first one was called Sandro Botticelli, and the other one was Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc. That one was done in France. Yes. But after the financial failures of both plays, their relationship ended.
Yeah, money kills a lot of love.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. But in 1927, De Acosta wrote another play. It was called Jacob Slovak, and it premiered on Broadway. It was a drama about anti-Semitism that had garnered some success at the time, and the New York Times called it an honest and interesting play. So that was kind of a good little feather in her cap.
If you could get attention from the New York Times, you did something.
Yeah.
Right?
That was, that was the start of something, or so it seemed at the time. And in 1928, she published her second novel, which was called Until the Daybreak. Until the Daybreak. So those 9 years between 1919 and 1928, she was extremely prolific and productive. We're talking about, 3 books of poetry, 2 novels, 3 produced plays, 1 off-Broadway, another one in Paris, a 3rd one on Broadway and in London.
Wow.
So she was doing quite well.
Sounds it.
Mm-hmm. And her notoriety gave her material for her writing.
Yeah.
Of course.
Of course.
But it didn't really help her career prospects, unfortunately.
Do you think that's because she was outwardly lesbian and her style, was just not what the public was craving and buying?
I think she was extremely talented, but I think that people were really intimidated by who she was and her willingness to be who she was. So instead, she was not remembered, or respected for her writing, but rather she was remembered for her romantic liaisons.
Got it, yeah.
And they kind of ignored those artistic contributions. And again, it's likely because she just wasn't willing to compromise herself or her work to fit the standards of acceptability at that time.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to her.
Well, yeah.
Good for her.
Well, good for her and bad for her. She didn't get the artistic attention that she probably deserved.
Came with a price.
Yeah.
Came with a price. But
I mean, there's a lot to be said for holding on to your own integrity and authenticity, and for that, how could you not respect her?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it is a shame that her art got overlooked.
Yeah. No, it is a shame. So her friend Ram Gopal, a dancer, remarked that when she met men who ran the theaters, they did not want to work with her or talk to her.
They weren't support bros.
Yeah, they were. They were not support bros. They did not want to work with a strong woman who loved women. Men found her just too overpowering.
Imagine.
Yeah, imagine that.
Imagine.
That never happens.
Nah.
Not anymore.
Oh no, we're so progressive.
Oh yeah, things have changed so much. So in the early 1930s, she made a decision to head out to Hollywood.
No, okay.
Yeah.
And she reinvents herself yet again.
That's right.
A true Sheela.
Right.
Don't give up.
Right. But she didn't even need to reinvent herself because she realized, like, Hollywood is open. I'm in New York.
Yeah, it's more stodgy.
They're more stodgy. They're more set in their ways.
Traditional.
I'm going to go to Hollywood where people are open and more accepting.
West. Yeah.
Exactly. She decided also that she wanted to start, trying some screenwriting. She was already writing plays, and she thought, why not go to Hollywood, work on some screenplays, meet some new people, just start fresh. Yeah. And it's funny because there's a story about how the second day she went out and she was in like a cafe, and she was wearing white slacks, her long, her white wide leg slacks and a white sweater. And her slick back, black hair, her short slick back black hair. She used to put, pomade in it. And somebody came up and said, you'll get a really bad reputation for looking like this.
Oh, no.
You shouldn't look like this.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
It is funny.
So she was a little disappointed. Yeah, her second day in Hollywood. She's like, wait a second. This is the crap I left behind in New York,
Oh.
Yeah. So she, of course, struggled to establish herself as a writer in a new arena in Hollywood. And she had no trouble, though, with the social part of it, of building this thriving social life. And there was something called the sewing circle. This was a phrase that they used in Hollywood at the time, and it basically described the group of lesbian and bisexual women writers and actresses, such as Mercedes and Tallulah Bankhead, and their relationships in celebrity circles in Hollywood. So they were called the sewing circle, and that was just kind of the inside term for
Do you know any
these
reason
women.
why it's the sewing circle as opposed to any other term?
Well, it's thought of as a women's group is a sewing circle.
Except,
so it's
not quite as traditional as as it implies, but okay.
It's kind of funny. The sewing circle.
The sewing circle.
Yeah, you want to join us for our sewing circle?
Sure, you could thread my needle anytime.
April, scandalous. Oh my gosh! But what's interesting though is this was not something. Again, it was a code word.
Yeah.
And really, the only two that were out, not closeted in the group, were Acosta and Bankhead.
Wow.
All the other women involved were not letting anybody know what their sexual preferences
were. Well, that
were.
makes sense. Yeah.
There's actually an interesting book, which I made note of. It's by Axel Madsen, and it's called The Sewing Circle.
Oh, interesting.
Which talks about those relationships in that
Yeah.
group of women.
Wow.
So definitely worth checking out, I think. New tributary for me to explore.
Right?
Right? Yeah.
Rabbit holes have rabbit holes.
Oh, yes, they do. Rabbit holes have rabbit holes. Yes, they do. Okay, so shortly after arriving in Hollywood, Mercedes ran into Greta Garbo.
Oh.
And Greta Garbo was actually considered the love of her life.
Oh.
I'll tell you that. And she described the first time she saw Garbo as the following. One day, I was in the lobby of the Para Palace Hotel, and I saw one of the most hauntingly beautiful women I have ever beheld. Several times after this, I saw her in the street. I was terribly troubled by her eyes, and I longed to speak to her, but I did not have the courage. So she was kind of observing her from afar to begin with.
Yeah.
But she eventually did find the courage. And Acosta was described in 1955 by Garbo's biographer, John Bainbridge, as, quote, a woman of courtly manners, impeccable decorative taste, and great personal elegance. A woman with a passionate and intense devotion to the art of living, and endowed with a high spirit, energy, eclectic curiosity, and a varied interest in the arts.
That's interesting because when I looked at the portrait that her husband Poole painted of her, it wasn't what I expected. Her image was not what I expected. It was very artistic and sophisticated, and there was a note of elegance. So
absolutely.
As you were saying that, I was like, yeah, that is consistent with what I just looked at.
Yeah.
How interesting.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So DaCosta and Garbo had very much in common, but Garbo was very reclusive. She was very reclusive. She kept to herself. She was private, reserved.
Just the opposite of DaCosta.
Yeah, this is true. But again, they had a lot in common, and they both loved the outdoors. And they went on vacations together. They loved to go up to, the Sierra Nevada mountains. And DaCosta ended up taking a house next door to Garbo in Los Angeles's Brentwood section and began working on a screenplay that would have the beautiful actress dressed as a boy for much of the film.
Interesting.
Yes, but MGM executive Irving Thalberg was not having that. He put a stop to the project.
Imagine Garbo was gorgeous.
Yep. He put a stop to that shit.
Yeah.
And he said, we have been building Garbo for years as a great glamorous actress, and now you come along and try to put her in pants and make a monkey out of her?
That is great.
I know.
Oh, well, not great, but funny.
Yeah, so we put the kibosh on that. But as their relationship developed, it became quite erratic and volatile. And Garbo always wanted to be in control. And the two were very close sporadically, and then they would be apart for lengthy periods when Garbo was annoyed by, Mercedes' obsessive behavior coupled with her own neuroses.
Yeah, you mentioned that Mercedes was a little volatile
she could be,
herself.
Yeah, she could be quite moody as well.
Yeah.
So it was very, I think they very much loved each other, but it was also, very volatile and dramatic, and there was just a lot going on. So for the next 12 years, though, they had this, unpredictable relationship, tumultuous relationship. And there were times when Garbo apparently would shower Mercedes with flowers and gifts, and Mercedes became so enamored that she pasted photos of Garbo into her own Bible.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And again, they would vacation together, and they liked to sunbathe in the nude, and they even ended up living together for a short time in 1932. Apparently that was kind of short-lived again, so...
And might I add, scandalous.
Yeah, and scandalous, yes. So, according to Acosta's longtime friend, Ram Gopal, once Mercedes met Garbo, all she did was dream of Garbo. But Garbo was afraid of having her life exposed.
Of course.
She did not want anyone to know.
That would have destroyed her career.
It would have destroyed her career. Yeah, exactly. Which is it's so fucked up, because not to be able to be yourself and to be true to yourself.
But in those days, and the way that she was branded as this goddess, this gorgeous
sex
goddess.
symbol. Yeah.
I mean, you just can't do it. And I would say that there are actors today that still, if you're branded in a certain way, living contrary to that is not good for your career. So you have to pick.
Right. It's true. So there was all this push-pull going on, because again, I think they did very much love each other, but Garbo would as soon as things got a little hot, she would pull away. She couldn't do it. So she continually rejected DaCosta, De Acosta, and that was very hard. So the last poem that Mercedes wrote for Garbo was in 1944. It goes like this: "You belong to me. Some things just belong to other things. There is no other way. Why not let us then say, for example, the salt to the sea, a bird to the sky, and you to me."
Oh,
isn't that sad?
That is sad.
Yeah.
Especially when
unrequited love.
Yeah.
In the immortal words of Lanford Wilson, unrequited love is such a bore. It truly is.
Oh.
And it's sad.
It is sad.
But again, I don't really think it was unrequited. I just think that it couldn't be. It couldn't be so.
Or Garbo wasn't willing to pay the price, and in some ways, you can't fault her for that.
I think De Acosta was completely tormented by it.
Yeah.
Completely tormented. And I'm sure on some level, Garbo was tormented by it as well.
Well, she obviously had strong feelings.
Yes.
So.
But in any case, they did remain friends for 30 years, during which time Garbo wrote De Acosta 181 letters, cards, and telegrams. About their friendship, Cecil Beaton, who was close to both women, recorded in his 1958 memoir, "Mercedes is Garbo's very best friend, and for 30 years has stood by her, willing to devote her life to her." So DaCosta is quoted speaking of a relationship with Garbo in the book Loving Garbo by Hugo Victors as saying, To the outward form of sex, which the body has assumed, I have remained indifferent. I do not understand the difference between a man and a woman, and believing only in the eternal value of love. I cannot understand these so-called normal people, again, who believe that a man should love only a woman, and a woman should love only a man. Just going back to what she had said before.
So much earlier.
Yeah. So, nonetheless, the turmoil took a toll on de Acosta, and in 1932, Mercedes' friend Norina telephoned her to tell her there was someone in town that she should meet. But at this point, Mercedes had been severely depressed and did not want to go out or meet anyone. But Norina urged her that she would not regret meeting this person. So Norina would not say who he was, since she wanted it to be a surprise. So finally, she persuaded Mercedes to come over, and it was on December 31st of 1932 that Norina was waiting at the door when Mercedes arrived. Upon seeing Indian mystic Meher Baba, de Acosta felt an overwhelming warmth radiating from him. She rushed into his embrace and asked, "Who are you?" Baba gestured, "I am you." Then suddenly he spelled out on his board, "Go and bring me your revolver." Mercedes was amazed, for she had not told anybody about the gun in her car. She went to the car, she returned with the revolver, handing it to Baba. He took the bullets out one by one and handed the gun back to her. Baba then consoled her. Suicide is not the solution. It only entails rebirth with the same problems all over again. The only solution is God, realization, to see God in everything.
Wow.
Wow, pretty amazing. Everything is easy then. Promise me that you will put this revolver away and you will never again think of suicide. She promised, and thus began a lifelong fascination and regard for Eastern spirituality.
Wow, how interesting.
That same year, 1932, Garbo left for Europe, and de Acosta embarked upon a mad affair with Marlene Dietrich.
Ooh.
I know.
This is so fun.
I know. The affair ended when Dietrich started an affair with her co-star, Brian Hernay, but they remained friends forever.
Oh, nice.
Which was really nice.
Yeah.
And in fact, a couple years later, de Acosta was in a bad car accident. Dietrich basically footed all the bills for her plastic surgery.
Oh.
Which was very
Good
nice.
friend.
Yes. And there's some great stories, again, just going down these rabbit holes where it's funny because de Acosta really credits herself for giving Marlene Dietrich her signature, masculine look.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, she says she took her out shopping for her first suit, encouraged her to wear pants.
Which she did, and she pulled it off in a very feminine way, although the images of de Acosta also looked very feminine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Powerfully feminine.
Yeah, yeah. And also, Garbo started dressing.
Right.
In these, and wearing these, palazzo style, like, wide leg pants and suit coats. And so she really, I said earlier she was a influencer of fashion.
Right, you mentioned that. That's right.
And she really was. And not just with these two women, with a lot of women in Hollywood. And she gave herself a lot of credit for it.
Yeah.
But it was probably, a credit due to a certain extent. So there's a photo too from 1935, and it was in the issue of Movie Mirror, and it's Garbo and de Acosta walking down the street in complimentary pairs of pants, which was scandalous. Absolutely scandalous. So in 1935, Mercedes' husband of 15 years, Abram Poole, finally decided he wanted a divorce.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
What was the rush?
Yeah. At this point, he had fallen in love with another woman, and he wanted to marry her instead.
Oh, okay.
So he said, okay, time to move on.
And was she
It only took him, they got married in 1920?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 15 years. 15
years?
It only took him 15 years. Yeah.
Of living apart, living
on different
lives.
coasts, yeah. But apparently Mercedes was really bummed about it.
Oh, what was it? Financial? What was it?
I'm sure to a certain extent it was financial. I mean, she came from wealth, but I don't think that she really sustained that wealth, because I know that he paid her alimony throughout most of her life.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't say, I mean, after the divorce, throughout
Yeah.
most of her life, I should say. But I think, again, I read a little bit about her feeling very rejected. Very, like, almost...
Which is sort of funny, considering they were living so independently.
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, I know she considered him a close friend, although she said she didn't find him very interesting, so I don't know what that's about. I don't really have too many
Maybe that
friends
got
that I
back
don't
to
find
him.
interesting. Yeah, maybe it did. Who knows, right? Oh my gosh. But she said that she felt very rejected, almost as, you know, almost as if like her father had rejected her. Almost as if she was very depressed about it. But it kind of makes sense.
Well,
I can't say I blame him.
Well, was this happening around the same time as Garbo? Maybe it was just too many rejections.
I think she was getting a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
I think she was feeling a lot of rejection in her life. And of course, never really being able to get the notoriety that she deserved with her writing either. She never really fully broke into playwriting the way, not playwriting, she never fully broke into screenwriting the way she had intended.
And
So,
she was
yeah.
never really acknowledged as, she never became a very popular author or
Right.
acknowledged for her art.
Exactly. So I'm sure there was, you know, rejection was kind of a theme.
Yeah.
A theme in her life. But at the time, she tried to move on. She fell in love with Ona Munson, the actress who played Belle Watling in Gone with the Wind. But their affair only lasted about a year. There were many women in her life, and I'm not going to touch upon all of them. But there were mostly actresses, but, you know, women in the arts, very intelligent women.
Yeah.
But again, I think she was always just trying to fill that hole from Garbo, because Garbo was really the one. And just
the love of her life.
The love of her life, and never able to, you know, fulfill that relationship. And she also became involved in some political causes at this time. So again, you know, her mother was Spanish, and so she had a lot of concerns about the Spanish Civil War that began in 1936. She was an ardent liberal, and she supported the government that opposed the nationalist faction. So she became, you know, quite involved. And again, you know, maybe somewhat of a distraction for her as well, but she was very involved in that. And at this time, she also became a vegetarian out of respect for animals, and she refused to wear furs.
Good for her.
Yeah. And that, you know, again, that was very unusual for that time. And she continued to, like I said, to continue to write, but with very little success. And finally, in 1942, she learned that the Office of War Information was publishing a propaganda magazine called Victory. And she moved back to New York to join the editorial staff there.
Oh, okay.
So she thought, well, I can be a working writer. You know, she finally had to go get like a job.
Yeah.
A job and write
Divorce
as a writer.
has a way of doing that.
What's that?
Divorce has a way of doing that.
Exactly. So she did that for quite a while. It's interesting. There's a lot of holes in her life. Like I really wanted to kind of delve more into, you know, the 1940s and 50s, and there wasn't a lot of information, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, a few more relationships mentioned, that kind of thing. But it does mention that in the 1950s, she emigrated to Paris, where she lived, and she continued with her writing. But through the 1950s and 60s, her health really started to deteriorate pretty dramatically. And during these years, she accidentally poured cleaning fluid into her eyes instead of eyewash.
Oh, no. Did that blind her? What happened?
How could you do that?
Oh, I don't know.
That seems very strange.
It doesn't seem very strange.
Doesn't eyewash come in a little bottle? And I don't know. But it almost blinded her.
Of course. Oh, my God.
And she continued to have infections in her right eye for the rest of her life. And she took to wearing an eye patch at this point, which became part of her look.
Her look. Yeah, her signature look.
She looked like a pirate.
Oh.
Arrgh. So added, again, to her already kind of eccentric costumes, it gave her that pirate look. And she also started having bad cases of debilitating shingles.
Oh, that's miserable.
That is miserable. Yeah. So she was having some issues. And in the early 1960s, she underwent a painful leg operation, and she was also diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Oh, dear.
And so had to have brain surgery.
Oh, my goodness.
So she was quite diminished by the 1960s.
And how old was she by that time?
By that time, she was in her late 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then after the third of her close acquaintances committed suicide, she suffered a nervous breakdown. And she fell into a state of severe depression and contemplated suicide once again.
Oh no.
I know. It's very sad.
It is sad.
It's very sad. Her own father, I don't think I mentioned this, her own father actually had taken his own life.
Oh, that's...
And she had a brother who took his life as well.
Oh my, that's unusual to have that much suicide in your family.
So she had a lot of suicide. She was surrounded by a lot of it, which is really sad. There was something about her dad. I think he was on some kind of expedition, and he jumped into a quarry in front of everybody.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just was gone.
Oh my.
Yeah. So, in a last-ditch effort to make ends meet, she sent shockwaves in Hollywood when she decided to publish her memoir, Here Lies the Heart, which seemed to confirm the rumors of her dalliances. The autobiography...
Did she name names?
What's that?
Did she name names?
Well, we're getting there, April.
Okay, sorry.
The autobiography detailed her intimate relationships with 1930s movie stars like Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich. And even if she never outright called them her girlfriends, there were descriptions of private beach vacations, gifts of flowers and jewelry, and feelings of intense longing. So it was kind of easy to read between the lines.
Right.
So while the book was well received, many of her friends felt that she had really stabbed them in the back. And they really felt outed by her.
Yeah.
And Garbo, at that point, officially ended their relationship. Their friendship. It was a friendship at this point. And remember Eva Le Gallion, the French actress?
Yes.
She actually outright accused de la Costa of making it all up, being a huge liar. Garbo snubbed her in the public and never spoke to her again. And Le Gallion referred to de Acosta as a liar and called the book Here Lies the Heart, Lies and Lies and Lies. Yeah. So this characterization, though, is inaccurate because we now know that many of her affairs and relationships with women, including that with Le Gallion and Garbo, are confirmed in personal correspondence, which I will talk about. But again, nobody wants to be outed.
Right.
I understand that. It especially during those times. I mean, it is it's your right.
Yep.
You know.
And it certainly could be a career ender for a lot of people. And
Sure. But, there was also talk of that there was really no overt outing. There was no spilling of like sexual secrets. And it was said that she was really kind and really, really kind to everybody, in terms of everybody in the book. She was, really was thoughtful and kind, genuinely good-hearted. And she just had this, she tried to write the book in a very kind of neutral way. And again, people were just kind of reading between the lines and reading into it. And they knew who she was, and they knew that she was out.
Right.
So, by that same token,
So it sounds like she's trying to sort of walk the line between needing to sell a good book that people would read and not necessarily providing a lot of provocative details, but just making those associations was probably more than enough.
Right. Yeah, and it was said she was either genuinely good-hearted or extremely talented to maintain such generosity of spirit throughout the entire book.
Oh.
But sadly, there's that word.
Yeah.
My husband was just teasing us.
Yeah,
about that.
Mike says we use sadly too much.
Sadly.
Tell me what's sadly today.
I'm going to tell you what's sad. Sadly.
Tell me, sadly.
The book seems to have contributed to a largely negative legacy.
Aww.
And again, probably mostly inspired by homophobia.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of, I'm sure, Hollywood moguls who did not want that kind of publicity on their stars.
Yeah, fuck all y'all. That's what I say. And again, she was a flagrant lesbian in an era that did not tolerate lesbianism. And even her biographers began painting, de Acosta as this deranged, pathological stalker. And it really contributed to the perception that de Acosta was little more than an eccentric socialite.
So did the book backfire? Did it sell or...
Yes, well, later on, it got the credit it deserved. But at the time, it did kind of backfire. And, she did need the money at the time. So a lot of people said, she just made all this up because she needed money. And But we know now that these stories were true.
Right.
She didn't make anything up.
Yeah.
Whether whether she should have released it or not, I can see both sides of it. I can see
Sure.
both sides of it, certainly.
Sure.
But Marlene Dietrich loved the memoir.
Oh, wow. Well, good.
I love Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah, that's great.
And she thought that Acosta's handling of the delicate nature was masterfully done, since it hardly broached homosexuality.
Good for her. Yeah.
She was another woman who was not afraid to be who she was.
Absolutely. I don't think she cared if people knew she swung in both directions or did,
She did not care. And so, again, the publication should have been a time of maybe excitement for Mercedes, but under the circumstances, threw her again into a deeper depression. So at this point, she was living a very threadbare existence. She had been receiving alimony from Abram Pohl since their divorce in 1935, but when he died in 1961, her allowance was frozen.
Oh, wow.
So because the royalties from the book were very slim, she was forced to sell all her jewelry and move into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on East 68th Street. And although she was offered $10,000 for her Garbo correspondence, she refused to sell it.
Well, good for her.
But fortunately, old lovers such as Marlene Dietrich lent her money to cover her bills. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So it's said that her only visitors in the end were young women hoping they would be introduced to Garbo. And although she had been labeled a society butterfly and tagged the dyke at the top of the stairs, she whispered to one of the few friends who still visited her, quote, "I'm sitting here all alone." She pointed to the autograph photographs in her room signed to Dearest Mercedes, to the one and only Mercedes, and others, and admitted that she had been forgotten by all the famous personalities in her past now, and that she was penniless. "I don't think it's made me bitter, just damn bewildered. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm lonely."
Aww.
She died on May 9th, 1968, in poverty and obscurity.
Aww. Well, that
Sadly.
was sad. Sadly, yes.
Sad.
It's sad. Sorry, Mike, it's sad.
I know. Some funeral attendees claim to have seen Garbo dressed with a coat, a long dark coat, and dark glasses, practically unrecognizable on the other side of the street.
Oh,
Perhaps it was her last goodbye.
perhaps. Perhaps it was.
I don't know. So, while the memoir was initially, again, unsuccessful, it was rediscovered in the late 1960s and widely read in the underground gay community and is now recognized as an important contribution to gay and lesbian history. And scholars of LGBTQ history are trying to make sure that she's obscure no longer.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. The Center City Museum and Library near 20th and Delancey Streets in New York is actually dedicated to the art of writing. So toward the end of her life, De Acosta sold her papers to the museum to pay for medical expenses, leaving behind various drafts, letters, and telegrams, and even her family Bible. So they now make up part of the Rosenbach's extensive collection of over 400,000 rare books and manuscripts. So she actually did give her letters at that point, but she made them off limits until the death of the people that she talked about.
So she really did try to protect them in her way. And,
Yeah.
I do have to say she had very few choices as she ran out of money. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, it said that she was offered $10,000 for those, for the Marlene, not for the, she was offered $10,000 for the Greta Garbo correspondence. And
she wouldn't do it.
She wouldn't do it.
Good for her.
But there was some situation where she gave them everything and said only in death can these letters be exposed.
Great.
And so I believe, after Garbo and some of her other lovers died, that's when, that's when they realized too that this book really was true.
Yeah, yeah.
That it wasn't made up and she wasn't a crazy stalker.
Yeah.
Just making shit up.
Well, it's funny because I know you're not a big novel reader. That's not your thing. But there was a very popular book that came out, I think, a couple of years ago, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And it was about two Hollywood women who were lesbians. They were lovers. They were deep lovers. But at that time, that would be absolutely scandalous and career breaking.
Yeah.
And so it was all about sort of hiding this relationship. And I had to I had to go down another little wormhole about who the book was based on. And it said that it was loosely based on several real-life Hollywood figures, including Elizabeth Taylor, Ava Gardner, and Rita Hayworth. Ooh. And, it's not clear, like they were referencing the fact that Elizabeth Taylor had 7 husbands, and that was part of the title. And it's not clear if they were necessarily saying it was based on all lesbian relationships, but it just was it's a theme that is being resurrected. Sure. And I thought of that book as you were talking about.
Maybe they were part of the sewing circle.
They very well could have been.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I really do support the idea of you love who you love.
Well, of course.
It doesn't know a gender per se. Depending on who you are. Like I said, I dabbled back in the day.
Yes.
And I do think I confirm to myself that I am straight. I will say that.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was fun. It satisfied a curiosity. Mm-hmm. But I knew pretty early on that it was just a curiosity, but it didn't feel really natural for me. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad I experienced these relationships. Mm-hmm. And other people, I think, choose to have both or one or the other, and we should have that right, because why do we have to put a gender to who we love?
Well, I think that a bigger question is, especially if you're a public figure, what is the price you pay? Because even today, where we're supposed to be much more tolerant and accepting, I think, especially in Hollywood, careers are there are famous people that feel they can't be outed, or it would be damaging to their reputation and brand. They're being sold as something else. And to some extent, maybe I'm being a little harsh, it is a choice.
Right.
There is a decision. If I'm going to be a sex symbol, whether I'm male or female, and I feel like I have to obscure my authentic sexuality and what I do in my private life, there is a decision.
No, but it's sad that it has to be a choice.
Well, yes, but that's the world we live in. I remember Ellen DeGeneres coming out, and she was both celebrated and villainized, depending upon where you sat.
Of course. Yeah, it's true. Look at JoJo Siwa. I give her a lot of credit.
Who is JoJo Siwa?
Wait, you don't know who JoJo Siwa is?
I don't. I confess.
Oh my God. She was this child star. Mm-hmm. And
somebody was talking about her recently.
Yeah, she was a child star, and she was a dancer. I think she was on like Dance Moms or something, one of those dance shows. Yeah. And then she eventually had her own show, and she little girls just loved JoJo Siwa. Mm-hmm. And she had a couple songs. She was a singer. She was a dancer. She was an actress. Mm-hmm. She always wore like a ponytail on top of her head. Oh. Anyway, she ended up. It was all through her teen years, and then she ended up coming out, in her late teen years.
And that was it?
Well, she's still around. In fact, I think I read recently she's on one of those shows like Dancing with the Stars or something.
Yeah.
That's usually where you go to dry, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Potentially.
Yeah, kind of.
Your career's over when.
Right. But I think she had a hard time, too, transitioning, because she started dressing kind of gothy and weird and doing weird makeup, and then she came out around that time. So she was a little villainized, and she was a little, people were kind of hard on her. They judged her kind of harshly. I remember they did an episode on SNL about her.
Aww.
And but she still remains very good-natured, and I have respect for her. I do.
Well, I think that whenever anybody is really being their most authentic self and they're being unapologetic about it, we all pay a price for that.
Of course.
Yes. And it's just not socially acceptable to be authentic.
Exactly. Well, let me just mention, next time we're in New York on one of our field trips, let's go to the Rosenbach Library.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Definitely.
We definitely need to go there.
We're going to
add that to our list. I just want to mention that Christopher Harity mentioned that her biography with backup documentation proves that same-sex love was alive and well in a period of time when it could have been buried under the usual denial and subterfuge. Mercedes Acosta's courage to live openly as a lesbian during a conservative era have left an enduring legacy for the LGBTQ community. Her life and work serve as a reminder of the importance of authenticity, self-expression, and breaking down societal barriers. All told, again, let's just revisit here. She wrote nearly a dozen plays, plus 3 volumes of poetry, a novel. Only 4 of her plays were ever produced. And she lived her desires publicly with verve and vigor at the time when few others would dare, and for that, she paid the price of that marginalized obscurity.
Oh.
She was truly a pioneer and indeed a champion in the early struggle for lesbian rights in this country.
Wow.
We love her. Yeah, and I'm going to say again, there are 2 books written about her. One is called That Furious Lesbian by Robert Schenck, and one is called Loving Garbo by Hugo Vickers. But again, there are no films, there are no documentaries, so
that's a shame.
it's her next project. April.
Yeah, yeah.
It's her next
Not
project.
to mention, as you
Her
alluded
next
to,
project. Yeah.
as you were alluding to about her being a fashion influencer
Yeah.
for bold women.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love this. This is
Amazing,
great.
right?
Yeah, thank you for sharing her.
I love her. I love her. And you know, I looked at some of her writing. I encourage you to check out some of her poetry is beautiful. It's very beautiful. She was very talented. And I really do think she probably would have become a famous writer had it not
she
been
born in a different era.
born in a different era, had it not been for the fact that she was, willing to live authentically. So anyway, we love you, Mercedes de Acosta. Thank you for being our Sheela today.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, Missy, for bringing her to life.
Thanks for listening, April. Thanks to everybody for listening. And please let us know your comments. Let us know your questions. We're looking for a little interaction here. We really are. We always welcome that. Bring us your Sheelas. Keep listening. Keep listening. And until next time, bye-bye.
SheelaNaGig, unabashed in your